It finally happened. I feel like I've said that 4 times. It finally happened. It finally happened, and it did indeed finally happen. We didn't get a here we go tweet from Fabrizio Romano. We got a minute-long hype video of all of the different Fabrizio tweets saying that it was about to happen, but it didn't happen, and now it's finally happened. Kylian Mbappe is joining Real Madrid, right? Obviously. Freaking obviously. So let's go over exactly what's happening here. Kylian Mbappe, a player who has scored a hat trick in a World Cup final, won another World Cup while being one of the best players in the team, and widely been considered one of the 5 best players in the world for the last couple of years, just joined the team that just won the Champions League on an end of contract for free. So there's a very obvious loser here, PSG. So I'm going to start with how dumb PSG has been over this entire process. Now, I told you 2 years ago that Kylian Mbappe was going to end up at Real Madrid at some point. I realize that that does not sound like an insane prediction, right? Even though PSG had managed to tempt him to come back the first time, it had come out that Kylian Mbappe had always been a childhood fan of Real Madrid. And once that is public knowledge, Florentino Perez, the guy that is, the Don, the godfather of Real Madrid, he leans into that. Florentino Perez is like the ex that you never can quite get over, because right when you're about to get over them, they text you again, they message you again, they're like manipulative, and they always just let you know that they're still around. They keep that door open. Florentino Perez is the master at that. And the person that was getting cucked, the person that got absolutely worked over and had their life ruined was PSG, because Florentino Perez has also known, the same way that I knew, because I knew Florentino Perez, not personally, but I've watched this guy work long enough to know that Kylian Mbappe was going to end up on Real Madrid, right? And PSG managed to keep him for 2 more years, but they got nothing for him. And when we're in an era of FFP, right, where getting money in for players is kind of important because it allows you to spend more money on other players, how the hell do you replace arguably the best player in the world with the nothing you got for him? Like, all you've got is you freed up his wage, which I realize is not an insignificant thing. But you were not going to be able to just roll his wage into a transfer fee and wage for another player that's going to be able to replace half the output that Kylian Mbappe was putting together at PSG. PSG should have seen this coming. I have absolutely no idea what PSG was doing over the last 2 years. They were having meetings with Macron, the French president. They were trying to offer Kylian Mbappe obscure French territories in order to stay on. But there is an inarguable fact, okay? And that is when somebody's contract runs out somewhere, they can go wherever they want, right? When you have a contract and then it runs out, you can go do whatever you want once that contract is over, right? Once it is expired, you can go do whatever the hell else you want. And Kylian Mbappe can do whatever the hell else he wanted. And that was always going to hit. But they should have sold him. And I realized that it would have been nauseating to sell somebody as good as Kylian Mbappe for $100 million. But you know what? Dortmund did it. You know why Dortmund did it? Because Jude Bellingham would have left at the end of his contract. Whoever is running player acquisition or like player retention, or whoever's running PSG in general, completely failed this. Right? They got too involved in the emotion. They got too involved in the idea of trying to preserve this sort of national symbol that they had on their team, right? Best French player, best French club. And sometimes you just got to make the right decision. If you want to be Real Madrid someday, you're going to need the money from a sale of Kylian Mbappe to reinvest in your team. You're also going to need to trust your youth players. Because if you want to be Real Madrid, then you need to have the pull Real Madrid has. PSG doesn't have that. A more Borussia Dortmund type approach would be smart for them, but whoever's running PSG is attempting to run PSG the same way that, Florentino Perez is running Real Madrid. The reason Florentino can run Real Madrid that way is because every child growing up in Europe, apparently, grows up dreaming of playing for Real Madrid. And then he just scratches at that. He sends you that one little Instagram DM to keep the interest alive. Antonio Rudiger talks about getting a letter from Florentino Perez 5 years before he signed for Real Madrid, and that was the first time he realized that Florentino Perez knew who he was. That activated, there's this mystique about Real Madrid. If you want to create that, and you want to operate like Real Madrid, then you have to, you have to build up a team that's able to win, and you have to build up a team of players that want to be there. And Kylian Mbappe, I'm sure he loves PSG, right? There's the same way that I love my hometown, but I don't live there now. I wanted to go out and experience something else. I'd always dreamed of being in New York. And we're able, and now I live in New York. So I'm sure Kylian Mbappe liked PSG. I'm sure there's a lot of things about PSG that he liked. Obviously seemed to have a lot of love for the fans, probably because if he didn't say that, he'd be worried about the fans attempting to burn his house down, knowing PSG fans. You know what I'm saying? So I'm sure it's hard to parse it exactly, but he played at PSG a long time since they brought him over from Monaco. But also, he's always wanted to go to Real Madrid. That's never changed. And it doesn't matter how much how much money PSG was going to give him. If money mattered, he'd be in Saudi Arabia right now. He's not in Saudi Arabia. He wants to go to Real Madrid. And PSG should have seen that coming, and now they have achieved the ultimate failure. Because maybe they were hoping that in keeping Kylian Mbappe for a year or two, even if it meant they might lose him for free, they'd be able to win a Champions League. No, they did return to the top of the French game. They won the French double, right across the top, Coupe de France and Ligue 1, but they didn't win the Champions League, right? As much as Kylian Mbappe would have loved to have left PSG with a Champions League victory, as much as they would have been hoping that they could have justified him leaving for free to fans with a Champions League victory. None of that happened. PSG got absolutely worked. PSG got cucked. They got destroyed. And the man that destroyed them is a man that's been destroying basically every club in the world for the last 5 years or so. Florentino Perez has not always been the best at what he did. The Galacticos era was a lot of fun, but not necessarily the most successful. But what Florentino Perez has managed to do over the last decade plus has been absolutely absurd, right? And the rebuild that they have gone through from a team that won 3 straight Champions Leagues, which who rebuilds from that and starts winning that many Champions Leagues right away again? Like who does that? Right? They manage the transition perfectly. Like Toni Kroos leaves, Fede Valverde takes the number 8. They've got Tchouaméni, they've got Camavinga, who looked unbelievable in the Champions League final, by the way. They've got Modric coming back for 1 year to aid the transition. They've got Endrick, and now they've got Kylian Mbappe coming in. And Florentino Perez is I would say, the single number one reason for Real Madrid's success, right? And I don't like it. I think it's annoying. That he is able to bully all of these clubs, right? I wish that PSG and other assorted clubs were better at dealing with this sort of stuff, and so that he didn't, I wish they had to pay $100 million for all these guys like they had to pay for Jude Bellingham, because Borussia Dortmund knows what the hell it's doing when it comes to being able to maximize their profit off of selling a player. And it's not like that sale went poorly. They made it to the Champions League final this year and have a good core to be able to go after some trophies next year as well, right? But you need to understand, mainly because I've read articles and kind of started to understand how Florentino Perez actually makes this happen. Let me just read you like a few quotes. This is from a Sportskita article. It is just like Florentino Perez getting asked about Real Madrid or about Kylian Mbappe, recently. Mbappe, I hope he decides his future soon. I always want to play with the best players in the world. He's glazing Kylian Mbappe, right? Anytime he gets asked about Mbappe, who wouldn't like to play with him? He's just one of the best players in the world. He knows that Kylian Mbappe wants to play for Real Madrid, right? They've had these conversations. They got close, but then, generational wealth and the pride of the French people brought Kylian Mbappe back to PSG or whatever. And then Florentino Perez played like the jilted lover. Like he'd been kind of screwed over and he was like, we can forget about him now. He's chosen his path. We'll forget about him. And to what Kylian Mbappe must be watching that like, no, Florentino. No, but I want to play for you. And then slowly over time, Florentino transitions back into complimenting Kylian Mbappe and saying, look, who knows what's going to happen? Or the Carlo Ancelotti line that is so worn out of, I don't want to talk about players on other teams. That's going to take care of itself. I want to talk about players on our team, right? Even though very clearly saying, he's obviously one of the best players in the world. We love Kylian Mbappe, but I want to talk about players on our team. And based off what I've heard and read about Florentino Perez, I'd be stunned if he hadn't sent, a letter or two, or a phone call, or a message to Kylian Mbappe over the last couple of years to maybe congratulate him on, winning a Golden Boot or whatever it was. Not the Golden Boot, sorry. Getting to the World Cup final or something, or maybe winning Ligue 1. He gets a text saying, hey, really, I love the goal you scored in this match. Just kind of let him know that he's watching. Just leaving that thought in Kylian Mbappe's brain that option is there, and they want me, and they still want me, and Real Madrid is there. And of course, it'd behoove of Florentino Perez to perhaps let Kylian Mbappe know that if he does manage to leave for free, that perhaps his wage could be a little more. Let's say some percentage of the transfer fee that would be paid for him. So patience in that situation would be a virtue because then Kylian Mbappe's wage would be even bigger. This is something that a lot of clubs have run into in the FFP era because if you spend money on a transfer for a player that directly affects, within the FFP cap, how much money you have left over to pay them a wage. So if you don't pay a transfer fee for a player, you can say, I'll pay you a bit more in wage. We've seen people like Dusan Vlahovic try and force their way out of clubs into contract in order to make something like that happen. Fiorentina getting all sorts of mad at him and then eventually launching him into the sun in Juventus anyways. I'm sure Don Florentino Perez leaned into all of that. But he bent PSG over a barrel over this entire negotiation. They lost completely. PSG got 2 more years out of Kylian Mbappe, but they got 2 more frustrated, awkward, uncomfortable years out of Kylian Mbappe where they won what, in their opinion, is the bare minimum expectation for PSG to win. And now France's biggest superstar is going to go play for Real Madrid. He's always wanted to play for, right? And if you are going to try and make Real Madrid pay, make them pay the price. Right, because is Kylian Mbappe worth more than $100 million? Yeah, but you could have gotten that a year ago. And if you'd gotten that a year ago and trusted some of your youth academy players, PSG would be in a way better spot than it is right now. And Kylian Mbappe would still be on Real Madrid because that was always going to happen. You can't stop a train. And Florentino Perez and players that want to play for Real Madrid, that's a freight train coming downhill.